Right now, at this exact moment, intelligence analysts across Washington, Tel Aviv, and New Delhi are scrambling to verify reports that have just emerged from multiple sources in the Western Pacific. China has allegedly transferred advanced nuclear submarine propulsion technology to Iran in a secret deal finalized just 72 hours ago. The Pentagon claims they're still assessing the credibility of these reports. Iranian state media insists no such transfer occurred. Multiple intelligence sources speaking to Reuters confirmed technical advisors from China's naval shipbuilding industry arrived in Bandar Abbas last week carrying encrypted data packages. One of these sources is lying, or the entire global naval balance of power in the Persian Gulf just changed overnight. Let me walk you through exactly what happened and why this could represent the most significant shift in Middle Eastern military capabilities since Israel developed nuclear weapons in the 1960s. On February 28, 2026, at approximately 0300 hours local time, a China State Shipbuilding Corporation Antonov An-124 cargo aircraft departed Dalian Shipyard in northeastern China. Flight tracking data from multiple commercial aviation monitoring services shows the aircraft flew southwest across Chinese airspace, transited Pakistani airspace with apparent diplomatic clearance, and landed at Bandar Abbas International Airport at 11:47 hours local time on March 1st. The aircraft remained on the ground for 6 hours and 17 minutes before departing without filing a return flight plan. Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps naval personnel secured a 3-kilometer perimeter around the aircraft during the entire ground time. No cargo was visible during unloading, which occurred inside a mobile hangar structure erected specifically for this operation. Within 18 hours of the aircraft's departure, the USS George H.W. Bush Carrier Strike Group, which had been operating in the Arabian Sea approximately 400 nautical miles from Iranian territorial waters, received orders to close to within 200 nautical miles of the Strait of Hormuz. On March 2nd at 6:15 hours, satellite imagery from Planet Labs captured unusual activity at Iran's Bandar Abbas naval shipyard, where Iran has been constructing what Tehran claims are conventional diesel-electric submarines based on North Korean Sinpo-class designs. The imagery shows a previously closed construction hall now displaying external ventilation systems consistent with metalworking operations involving radioactive materials. That same morning, the Director of National Intelligence briefed the President on what unnamed officials describe as a technology transfer that could enable Iran to deploy nuclear-powered attack submarines within 36 to 48 months. To understand why this matters, you need to understand what nuclear submarine technology actually means and why no Middle Eastern nation has ever possessed it. Nuclear-powered submarines represent the apex of naval warfare technology. Unlike conventional diesel-electric submarines which must surface or snorkel frequently to recharge batteries, nuclear submarines can remain submerged for months at a time, limited only by crew endurance and food supplies. The technology centers on a nuclear reactor that generates heat to produce steam, which drives turbines for propulsion and electricity generation. This sounds simple, but requires mastering dozens of interconnected challenges that only 6 nations have successfully solved: the United States, Russia, the United Kingdom, France, China, and India. The reactor must be compact enough to fit inside a submarine hull, while powerful enough to drive a vessel displacing 8,000 to 14,000 tons at speeds exceeding 30 knots submerged. The reactor shielding must protect the crew from radiation, while remaining light enough not to compromise the submarine's performance. The metallurgy for the pressure hull must withstand depths exceeding 400 meters while accommodating the reactor's heat signatures. The cooling systems must function silently to avoid acoustic detection. Iran has never demonstrated capability in any of these domains. Iran's most advanced submarine is the Fateh class, a diesel-electric design displacing approximately 600 tons with a maximum submerged endurance of approximately 5 days before requiring snorkeling operations. Iran has attempted to build larger BSAT-class submarines based on North Korean Sinpo technology, but these remain conventional propulsion systems incapable of true blue water operations. A nuclear-powered submarine would transform Iran's naval capabilities fundamentally. Iranian submarines could patrol the entire Indian Ocean, threaten American carrier strike groups continuously rather than episodically, deploy off the coast of Israel, maintaining persistent strike capability, and operate far from Iranian bases, making them nearly impossible to neutralize preemptively. The strategic calculation that has always constrained Iranian naval ambitions is that Iran's submarine fleet is port-bound and vulnerable. American and Israeli intelligence tracks every Iranian submarine departure and return. Nuclear propulsion eliminates this vulnerability by enabling submarines to deploy for months without surfacing or returning to port. China's capability to provide this technology represents a geopolitical earthquake that experts have warned about, but most analysts considered unlikely. According to Dr. Thomas Shugart, adjunct senior fellow at the Center for a New American Security and former U.S. Navy submarine commander, China has developed advanced nuclear submarine technology over the past 15 years that rivals Russian capabilities and in some domains approaches American standards. China operates 6 Type 093 Shang-class nuclear attack submarines and is currently constructing the more advanced Type 095, which U.S. Navy assessments suggest incorporates pump jet propulsion similar to American Virginia-class submarines and significantly reduced acoustic signatures compared to previous Chinese designs. The Type 093 utilizes a pressurized water reactor generating approximately 100 megawatts of thermal power, sufficient to drive the submarine at maximum submerged speeds of 30 knots. China has also developed the Type 094 Jin-class ballistic missile submarine, demonstrating mastery of the larger reactor systems required for strategic submarines. Here's what makes this transfer uniquely dangerous. China wouldn't need to provide Iran with complete submarines. The technology transfer could involve reactor designs, enriched uranium fuel assemblies, radiation shielding specifications, and technical training for Iranian engineers. Iran already possesses substantial nuclear infrastructure from its civilian nuclear program and its covert weapons program that was frozen but not dismantled under the 2015 Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action. Iran operates uranium enrichment facilities at Natanz and Fordo, capable of producing highly enriched uranium. Iran has developed advanced centrifuge technology and possesses thousands of trained nuclear engineers. What Iran has lacked is the specific engineering knowledge to miniaturize reactor designs for submarine applications and the metallurgical expertise to manufacture reactor components to the precision tolerances required for naval applications. If China has provided this knowledge through technical documentation and advisor training, Iran could potentially construct indigenous nuclear submarine reactors within 3 to 4 years. From China's strategic perspective, this technology transfer makes cold, calculated sense, even though it crosses a threshold Beijing has historically avoided. China faces increasing confrontation with the United States across multiple domains: trade, technology, Taiwan, South China Sea territorial disputes. China has watched as the United States strengthens military alliances with Japan, South Korea, Australia, and India, while deploying additional carrier strike groups and bomber forces to the Pacific. From Beijing's viewpoint, anything that distracts American military resources and strategic attention away from the Western Pacific serves Chinese interests. An Iranian nuclear submarine capability would force the United States to maintain permanent carrier presence in the Middle East and dedicate attack submarines to tracking Iranian vessels. According to Dr. Tong Zhao, senior fellow at the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace's Nuclear Policy Program, China may calculate that enabling Iranian naval power creates a strategic dilemma for Washington that benefits Beijing. Every American submarine tracking an Iranian nuclear boat in the Indian Ocean is one less submarine available to monitor Chinese vessels in the South China Sea. Every carrier strike group committed to the Persian Gulf is one less carrier available for Taiwan contingencies. The strategic logic mirrors Cold War Soviet support for Cuba and Vietnam, where Moscow armed adversaries in American spheres of influence to impose costs and divert resources. From Iran's perspective, acquiring nuclear submarine technology represents the ultimate deterrent against American and Israeli military superiority. Iran has watched as the Abraham Accords normalized relations between Israel and multiple Arab states, leaving Tehran increasingly isolated. Iran has endured waves of assassinations targeting nuclear scientists and military commanders. Iran's conventional military forces cannot match American air power or Israeli strike capabilities. Iranian military doctrine has increasingly emphasized asymmetric capabilities, ballistic missiles, proxy forces, and denial strategies in the Strait of Hormuz. Nuclear submarines would represent a quantum leap in Iranian deterrence by creating an invulnerable second strike capability. Even if American or Israeli forces destroyed Iran's land-based missile forces and nuclear facilities in a first strike, Iranian submarines operating in deep ocean could retaliate weeks or months later. This creates the same deterrence logic that has prevented nuclear powers from attacking each other since 1945. From the American and Israeli perspective, this development represents a nightmare scenario that intelligence communities have gamed but hoped would never materialize. The United States has spent decades preventing nuclear submarine proliferation, precisely because the technology is so destabilizing. When India developed nuclear submarines with Russian assistance, Washington accepted it reluctantly because India faces Pakistan and China and isn't hostile to American interests. Iran acquiring this capability is fundamentally different because Tehran has sworn to destroy Israel, regularly threatens American forces, and supports proxy armies across the Middle East. According to Admiral James Stavridis, former Supreme Allied Commander at NATO and current Vice Chairman of Global Affairs at the Carlyle Group, an Iranian nuclear submarine fleet would require the United States to fundamentally restructure its Middle East military posture. The U.S. Navy would need to deploy additional attack submarines permanently to the region. Surface vessels would operate under constant threat from submarines that could approach undetected. Aircraft carrier operations would become significantly more dangerous because nuclear submarines can pace carrier strike groups indefinitely while remaining submerged. Israel faces even more acute threats because Iranian submarines could patrol off the Israeli coast continuously, positioning themselves for strikes against Israeli ports, offshore gas facilities, and desalination plants that provide most of Israel's drinking water. Israeli anti-submarine warfare capabilities are substantial but optimized for diesel-electric submarines operating in the relatively shallow eastern Mediterranean. Nuclear submarines can operate in deeper water further offshore while maintaining strike capability. There are three scenarios for how this situation develops, and the probabilities shift dramatically depending on verification of the technology transfer and American response decisions. Scenario 1 is diplomatic containment with approximately 30% probability. In this pathway, the United States and Israel confirm through intelligence collection that China has provided technical data but no physical reactor components or fuel assemblies. Washington and Jerusalem calculate that Iran still faces a 3 to 4 year development timeline, providing opportunity for diplomatic pressure on Beijing. The United States threatens secondary sanctions on Chinese defense companies involved in the transfer. China, facing potential economic consequences and concerned about further damaging relations with Washington, agrees to halt technical assistance and recalls advisors from Iran. Iran continues indigenous development but progresses slowly without continued Chinese support, eventually producing a submarine with nuclear propulsion but significant technical limitations. This scenario requires China to value economic relations with the United States more than strategic benefits of arming Iran, which is uncertain given deteriorating U.S.-China relations across all domains. Scenario 2 is military interdiction with approximately 45% probability. In this pathway, American and Israeli intelligence confirms that China has provided not just technical data, but physical reactor components, enriched uranium fuel assemblies, or critical manufacturing equipment. Israel, which has consistently maintained that it will not allow enemies to obtain game-changing weapons capabilities, concludes that diplomacy cannot prevent Iranian nuclear submarine deployment. Israeli F-35I stealth fighters and Dolphin-class submarines conduct strikes against the Bandar Abbas shipyard and associated research facilities before Iran can complete reactor installation. The strikes employ bunker-penetrating munitions targeting underground construction facilities. Iran retaliates with ballistic missile strikes against Israeli cities and American bases, but the retaliation remains calibrated to avoid triggering full-scale war that Iran would lose. China condemns the strikes but takes no military action. The Biden or Trump administration, depending on who occupies the White House, provides diplomatic cover for Israeli action while deploying additional forces to deter Iranian escalation. This scenario assumes Israel maintains the same red lines it has demonstrated with Syria and Iraqi nuclear programs, and that Iran calculates that military retaliation must remain limited to avoid existential conflict. Scenario 3 is acceptance and adaptation with approximately 25% probability. In this pathway, the United States and Israel determine through intelligence assessment that the technology transfer has already progressed too far to interdict effectively. China has provided complete reactor designs, and Iran has dispersed manufacturing across multiple facilities, making comprehensive strikes impossible without massive bombing campaign that would trigger regional war. Washington and Jerusalem reluctantly accept that Iran will possess nuclear submarines within 48 months and begin adapting military posture accordingly. The United States deploys 4 additional attack submarines permanently to Fifth Fleet based in Bahrain. Israel accelerates development of autonomous underwater vehicles and advanced sonar networks for submarine detection. NATO allies in the Mediterranean enhance anti-submarine warfare capabilities. This represents Cold War-style containment, where adversary capabilities cannot be eliminated and must be countered through persistent monitoring and superior capabilities. This scenario requires American and Israeli leaders to conclude that prevention through military force creates worse outcomes than containment through capability development, which contradicts decades of stated policy regarding game-changing weapons proliferation to Iran. Watch for 5 critical indicators in the next 48 to 72 hours that will reveal which scenario is materializing. First, satellite imagery of Bandar Abbas shipyard. If construction activity continues visibly with no apparent security concerns, diplomatic containment remains viable. If Iran begins camouflaging facilities or moving operations underground, military strikes become more likely. Second, Chinese diplomatic communications. If Beijing's foreign ministry issues strong denials and offers to facilitate inspections, China may be seeking off-ramp. If China dismisses allegations without offering transparency, the transfer likely occurred, and Beijing is committed. Third, American carrier movements. The USS George H.W. Bush and USS Abraham Lincoln positions indicate strike preparation timeline. If both carriers close to within 150 nautical miles of Iranian coast and begin cycling combat aircraft, strikes may be imminent. Fourth, Israeli cabinet meetings. If Prime Minister Netanyahu convenes the Security Cabinet for emergency sessions, Israel is preparing military options. Fifth, oil markets. If Brent crude spikes above $90 per barrel, markets are pricing significant conflict probability because traders possess information suggesting military action is likely. This story breaks at a moment when American attention is consumed by domestic politics, European security remains focused on Ukraine, and Middle Eastern diplomacy appeared to be entering a period of relative stability following the Abraham Accords expansion. If China has indeed provided Iran with nuclear submarine technology, it represents the most significant shift in Middle Eastern military balance since the 1979 Islamic Revolution brought a hostile theocratic regime to power in Tehran. I'm monitoring this situation minute by minute through satellite imagery providers, defense intelligence sources, and diplomatic channels across 3 continents. When the next development breaks, whether it's additional intelligence confirming the transfer, Chinese diplomatic responses, Israeli military preparations, or American policy decisions, you will understand it here first with the technical depth and strategic analysis you cannot get from mainstream media coverage. Subscribe to this channel right now and turn on all notifications because the next 72 hours will determine whether we're witnessing a quiet technology transfer that reshapes naval warfare for a generation or the opening moves toward military strikes that could ignite the Middle East. Drop a comment and tell me what you think. Can Iran actually master nuclear submarine technology even with Chinese assistance? Will Israel strike before Iran completes a nuclear submarine? Does China understand the consequences of providing this technology to a regime that has sworn to destroy Israel and drive America from the Middle East? I read every comment, and I want to know whether you think we're looking at diplomacy, military strikes, or a fundamental shift in how America and Israel approach Iran's military capabilities. The technology transfer allegedly happened 72 hours ago. If true, the countdown to either military strikes or Iranian nuclear submarine deployment has already begun. Thanks for watching. The deal nobody saw coming may be the deal that changes everything.